This is really helpful.
So our application last time was just our general hello world. Make sure you got it checked into TFS because it has a lot of code that you'll want to use in it as an example. So mine is not checked in, but I hope yours is because I can remember it so far. All right, good. So we jumped right in. That's the best way to do with Windows Forms. And you guys just took off and we're doing all sorts of things. So let's back up just for a second and take a look at some of the requirements when we're talking about Windows Forms. I do, like I said, like to just jump right in, and everybody seemed to really take off with it. Whenever we're talking about a graphical user interface or a GUI, we're talking about a user interface that is not just character-based, right? And the GUI, graphical user interface term, actually was developed in response to Microsoft and Apple products that were graphical in nature. And Windows was the first one. If you've ever watched any of those old movies, you'll see they, I don't know, stole from IBM first, so they were able to create graphical systems. Now, we talked yesterday or last time about the fact that we have to include the system.windows.forms namespace. That namespace is a whole subsystem of classes, and all of those classes let us develop these GUI applications. You saw with the form builder, our form editor, it's all drag and drop, so it's really easy to use. That's one reason that Windows Forms have been popular for so long and continue to be popular because it's a really easy to use interface. We saw some of our control classes last time. We used a few labels and text boxes and buttons. All of those different classes that we can use on our form all work the same way, right? They're all consistent. Now, some other things that we hadn't really talked much about are container classes. These would be classes that contain other things. Our form was the primary container class, right? Because that form contains all of the controls that we put on it. So it is our ultimate container. So let's think about how we can zoom in on these things. We start out with our control class, like a label. We instantiate an object, a label object. That object has properties, and those properties have values. So last time we used the text property a lot, and when we updated the text property with different values, we saw how that displayed on that control. When we're looking at our basic Windows form, we could, let me make sure I don't have a bunch of stuff. Go back here. Ah, there it is. We could leave our form title set as Form 1, but that would be pretty unprofessional, right? Because that's kind of the first thing that someone's going to see about your application is that title. So always make sure you're giving something a nice title. Speaking of that, we have some rules that we need to follow when we're talking about Windows Forms. The main reason Windows has been so popular for so long is because of its consistent look and feel. That means if I use Word, I have a title bar, a minimize, restore, and close button. It's very consistent. No matter what Windows application I'm using, the big X is usually going to close out that form, right? So that consistency is what people have really responded to. It made it easy to learn new applications because they're all consistent. We want to use those same types of standards in our forms to make sure our forms are consistent with Windows. We want to have some sort of accessibility built into our forms if we have an option like verbiage and things that are helpful for handicap. And a lot of that capability is built in, and that's what they want to point out, that you do have that option when you're creating a Windows form. We want to make sure all of our controls are properly aligned. If you get on a website or a form and it's all dankety, everything's all kind of not very lined up, pretty awkward, do you feel comfortable giving them your personal information? You probably shouldn't, right? So in the same way, you want to make sure you're properly aligned and everything is looking good. We want to avoid clutter. There should be white space evenly spread out on your form so that it's easy to look at, easy to read, not all junked up. We want to take care with color. We don't want to have ugly colors, clashing colors, kind of like my purple thing. That would be a really bad example. We want to be careful. There's even like a new Code Academy class on using color and which colors coordinate well with others. So that's a really big topic. You can always take a look at that if that's something that you need. One thing that's interesting to me, you guys have probably heard, but they say that of colorblind people, the majority of people that are colorblind are men, and the color that they have the hardest time seeing is red. And a lot of times when we want to emphasize something on a screen, we make it red, and that can actually be the opposite of what they can see. So that's a problem. Lastly, you want to think about, and I'm sure there's lots of other things, but for this list, you want to think about your target audience. If I'm making an application for the stuffy company that I used to work for down the road, I'm going to make sure that everything is perfect. It's very professional. I'm going to use the exact terminology that my company uses. I want to make sure that who's got that going. Somebody's got to turn off their mic on their laptop. Find it. I can't talk that way. Okay, so our target audience again. If they're stuffy, they're super professional, I've got to make sure everything is exactly right. If I'm making something that's geared towards 8-year-olds, okay, I'm getting feedback. Turn that mic off.
Got it.
Got it? No, don't got it.
I did have it. There's a mute on the app.
Okay, when your phone does that, my phone does that.
It still wants to pick you up, so.
It's not recording.
He's got it. Target audience, you got it. All right, so let's look at this little teeny form here. We have this little Windows form. It says it's a simple Windows application. Let's take a look at what's on here. First of all, it's using the form class. We're going to look at the code that created this. The instance of the form class that we're looking at here is going to be called Windows 0. Whenever we are looking at the title of this form, that's the text property, and the value that's been assigned to that text property is simple Windows application. So we see that form there. So here's our code. Now this is a little different than what we would do, but this is just breaking it down to as simple as possible. Here's our class, Windows 0. Here's our constructor for Windows 0. All our constructor does is set the text property, and our main creates an instance of that Windows 0 form running that constructor, and then displays it. So that would be the basic code that we would need to create a form display. If you download this presentation, you can look at all of those pop-up thingies. Now, real quickly, what's the difference between console and a Windows form? Our console apps we talked about last time are all top-down. We were using a character-based display. Our main closing curly braces halt execution of our program. As soon as we hit those curly braces, that thing was over, right? And whenever we needed input or wanted to display output, we actually interfered with the operating system. We cause an interrupt to the operating system to get that information from the console. On a Windows form, instead of being top-down, we're event-driven. That means our code can be a little more scattered. We have to be more aware of where it is and where it belongs. Our Windows form is sitting in a process loop, waiting for an event. It gets notified by the operating system that an event occurred. So either way, we're still interfering with the operating system, right? And then those event handlers are just special methods that indicate what should be done when an event occurs. We saw that we had all of these different controls in our toolbox that we could use and how we could add them to our form. You guys have all done this. Let's get past that. I think we've got all this. If you look at this text box, remember the text box control contains many properties. And if we want to have data, words, numbers display in that text box, it would be the text property that we would want to set a value to. Okay, that one's quick. It's like freezing in here before you guys got here. And now it is not. Must be all those computers, huh? Generating some heat.
A lot of computers, a lot of people
But
sitting in
something.
as well.
Let's look at our programming based on events. This is really quick. We are all used to events, right? Events drive us. I don't know about you, but I would forget all of my events if I didn't have my calendar on my phone to remind me. So if I have an event, I place that event in my calendar so that I can be reminded. And then when the event actually happens, we can think of it as being wired to that birthday party process. We're ready to have a party. Let's do it. That's all we get, a party though. So when we're talking about event-driven execution, here we have this button. The user is interacting with the form. They click this button. When they click that button, the operating system issues that event, and it tells us about it. Whenever the event is issued, a piece of C# code runs in response, and then the form's appearance could be updated or modified in some way as a result, but no matter what, it's just going to display again, right? So with our console app, we had to actually build in a loop if we wanted to prompt the user to run it again. Otherwise, they had to just run it all over. With the Windows form, it's always going to be sitting there displayed until they close out of it. So that's a nice thing about it being event-driven for us. Whenever we're looking at an event, we have what are called delegates in C#. C# delegates are used to connect our C# method, our code, with a form event. That's called wiring that event. I could use one event for several different items on my form. So I could have 3 buttons on my form that all ran the same method, depending on how I want to do that. And we're going to do that in just a second, so it'll make more sense. But we have a delegate definition behind the scenes, and Windows is going to create this for us. And it's actually that line of code that we saw last time to delete if our form gets messed up. We'll do that again so that you can see it. I hate that picture. But here's some examples of the Windows-generated code behind the scenes that we were looking at last time. This very bottom line is the delegate. The delegate here says that when button 1 is clicked, we want to add an event handler for this button 1 _ click. So that way we've associated this event handler, button 1 _ click, with the click event of button 1. Again, what we need to remember more than anything is that that's the line of code to delete if we've deleted that control off the form, and it's very upset with us. Okay, you guys know about those things. We're going to stop there and get back to it because it's much more fun to be creating them. So I want to create a new Visual Studio app for this first one here. So let's do a new project. Now I'm going to be doing a Windows Forms app. So I'd like for this to be CH9 Seasons 102. So we're going to kind of develop this app as we go, which of course is, not a very good design approach. But we just want to try some things so that you guys can have some example code. So that doesn't necessarily always work with a perfect application. First of all, we want to customize our form. With our form, I'm going to go down to the text property and set my text property to something meaningful. So we'll call this season display. So we're just going to have, I think, maybe some radio buttons for the different seasons, like spring, summer, fall, and winter. And then we'll put some checkboxes in, maybe for some other things so that you guys can see how to work with those.
So let's set our back color. You can set yours to whatever you like. I like to do this because it makes it easier for me to tell which application was you guys's and which one was the morning class. But it's also a nice habit for us to get into because things just look better if we're a little bit more concerned about it. I'm going to use this ugly dark olive, and then I'm going to set my forecolor. Since I used kind of a dark back color, I want my foreground color to be light that will show up on that. Everything looks like it would be awful, so I guess I'll just go with a ivory. I want to update my font, and you may not need to, but I'm going to set mine to 12 so that you guys can see the form a little bit easier. It can be hard to see. Beautiful. Now you notice as we're beginning these applications, notice I've quit worrying about renaming our program.cs file, right? Because we're not really going to have other controlling files. We could have all sorts of class CS files, but we don't have to worry too much about it. Now, like I said, I'd like for this to be a season list. Let's put a big label at the top, kind of a heading. Remember, it doesn't matter how I size my label. .NET is going to make it whatever size it thinks it needs. So for this label, let's put some text here. And I'm just going to put something like which season. And then I want it to be a large font. I want this to be kind of like a heading. Go way up there. So under my which season heading, I think I would like a box of radio buttons over here. And these are going to be my spring, summer, winter, fall radio buttons. Whenever I'm working with radio buttons, I need to have them in a group. A radio button implies being in a group because I can only click one of them. So if I can only click one of them, what are the others? They must all be grouped somehow. So let's use a container control. If you expand your containers, you'll see that we do have a group box. So let's grab that. I want to put my group box on my form. And I notice right away my forecolor has this weird bug where it's not picking the right color. So I'm going to switch it and then switch it back, and that seems to fix it. Now I'd like my group box to say something a little bit different than group box. So I'll change my text property to say select season. That looks good. My colors, thank goodness, are not nearly as awful as last time. All right, I've got this beautiful group box. Let's put some radio buttons in it. I'm going to grab my radio button control, and I'm going to make sure, notice how my group box is selected. If my radio button is not inside my group box is not selected. But if my radio button is inside of it, it is selected. And I've got to make sure it does end up inside that group box or it won't be part of the group. So when we look at radio buttons, first of all, we can change our text property to be what we want it to say. So we'll make spring be first, I guess. Spring is right. Now, some other things that we can change about our radio button have to do with the order. Find the control, the property check align. When you look at the property check align and you do the drop down, notice how it's these little grid marks. I can click on these and change the alignment. So right now it's to the left. If I click on this one, notice how it swaps it back and forth. Now I could keep trying some of those different options, and some of them are going to put the little button right on top of my text, which isn't very helpful. I could put it above or below I would need my radio button to be bigger if I did that. So I'll leave my check aligned over here at the default, but be aware that you can change that all around if that's something that you want to do. The next property on our radio button, the checked property that's set to false right now, that's the property we're going to be most concerned about with a radio button, because that's the property that indicates if this radio button was checked or selected or not. Right now, our checked property is set to false. That looks good. Okay, I want another radio button. This one is going to be summer. So my text property, I will make summer. And I need to rename it. I'm going to name this RAD Summer. And I realized I didn't name my spring radio button. I was worried about all those other things. So I'm going to click back on my spring radio button and name it RAD for radio button and spring, because that's what it says on it. Okay, so I've got spring and summer. I want to copy my summer radio button. So I'll right click and copy. Now, when I paste this, this can be an area where we could end up with the radio buttons outside of our group box. So be sure again that you just kind of have selected that group box and then paste. So it's not super friendly with hand movement. Now, this one is going to be spring, summer, winter. So let's make it RAD winter in its name. And then we'll make the text property say winter. If you notice, it didn't really do us any good to copy it because we still had to change the same two properties we were changing before. But sometimes you could have a whole bunch of customization in a field where it could really save you a lot of time to copy it. I'll go ahead and grab a new radio button, drop in our group box, and I'll make this one be fall. Now, when I'm looking at my radio buttons here, how was it that we could like organize everything? They're not exactly even. I want to make sure they're all starting at the same place. The little lightning bolt. No, I thought we had a toolbar or something that would help us. Uh-huh. That's what we need. That alignment toolbar. Now we can align our lefts. And I'm going to do, what do I want? Make vertical spacing equal so that mine are lined up properly. And then I might need to update my group box size just a little bit. Make it look the way you want. And then you can move that whole group box around. I want to try running this. Make sure that our radio buttons all ended up in the group box. So I'm going to test real fast and make sure that I can only click one radio button. Now, when it started up, when this form loaded up, my spring button was already checked, and it should not be. That's like some sort of bug in .NET, and we probably won't be able to get that fix installed, but I'm going to do some research tonight. So be aware that that might behave a little differently on your computer at home. So you might have maintenance installed, but they haven't installed here. So it shouldn't be displaying with one of them checked because we didn't say that we wanted one of them checked. But other than that, I can tell that they're all working. Bless you. If I select one, it deselects all the others. Now, if you have one that is letting you have 2 selected, then one of those things is not inside your group box. So if somebody selects spring, summer, winter, or fall, let's display a little message to them underneath our group box. Let's use a label. And of course, remember, it wouldn't matter if we used a label or a text box for a display. Now, my label, I'm going to name this LBL message. And I think that's about all I need to change about it. Now, I would rather it not say label 2 when it starts up. So I think I want to change my text property to say something like, welcome to the season display. It's really just a placeholder, but that looks better than label 1 as a placeholder. So now we see our label down there looking good. So I'm going to double click my spring radio button. I want to add an event procedure. Did you have a question, Austin?
No, that's true.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I'm going to double click on my spring radio button. That's going to create our event procedure. There it goes.
Right?
I don't know where it is. Ignore it. Ignore it. Can you guys find it? Could you make them stop? They care what students say.
It's the classroom that's just right over there.
They think there's like this WD-40 stuff or something they could squirt in there, couldn't they?
Not open the door so much.
Donovan's going to tell him.
I'm not going to tell him.
I will make a maintenance request. I actually got permission to get rid of this 50-year-old PC that sits back here behind me. So I'll just do 2 maintenance requests at once and ask for them to oil the door hinges. Those maintenance guys don't even question stuff like that. They're like, ah, they're teachers. We don't know what they're talking about. Like, it is so squeaky. It's so squeaky. I was on a trip once with about 60 teenagers for 2 or 3 nights to State Skills USA, and we got a complaint from the hotel that students kept opening their doors. And we thought, well, if that's the worst of it, that's pretty good. We'll take it. It might be annoying. Exactly.
And just
All those other guys jumping out the windows.
Getting outside somehow. I've always wondered about those teachers. I was with teachers too. There was a time I was at a old hotel in Jeff City, and there were students jumping out the windows to escape. Because some teachers would go through and like lock all their doors and tape them and do all this fun stuff. And so they would escape out their windows. And so there were actually like auto tech teachers out in the parking lot chasing around high school boys who were having a great time making their teachers chase after them. Dude, you're going to give yourself a heart attack. What an idiot. It's not worth it. Okay, so we have our event. What is our event named here for our radio button? I want you to look at what's happening. Checked, changed. So that's the event name that we're looking for when we have a radio button. Remember, with our button, when we click the button, our event was _click. Now that we're looking at our radio buttons, our event is checked or changed, because when someone checks the radio button or changes the radio button state, this event procedure will be kicked off. So let's update our label. I'm going to set my label message text property equal to spring flowers. So let's run it. And if it works like it did this morning, my label is already going to say spring flowers when it pops up because of that bug. And it does. And so that's annoying to me. But I can't make the bug go away right now. So it should still say our original message, and none of these radio buttons should be checked. But we'll just see if maybe Visual Studio decided they were going to change the way that worked. So now my spring event procedure is already executed. I'm going to click summer, winter, fall. Nothing's changing. So let's add some more. I'm going to go back to my form, and I'm going to double click summer. So if someone clicks on this summer radio button, I want to set my message to say summer fun. We should come up with like song lyrics or something. But barring that, let's run it. Now, when you click summer, you should see your label for summer. When you click spring, you should see your label for spring. Is it working?
Mine's not like in the message function.
Your label?
Yeah.
Go to your form and click on your label, and let's check its name.
Did you have some before? It's just you named it LPR.
Yeah, I named mine different.
But then you have dot message.
Dot text.
That's it.
What is you named yours that big one?
Yeah. Well, that name is that message. I spelled it wrong this time. So, like my label spelled wrong is what I was trying to say, but
And now that's what I would double check.
well,
Yeah, it should just be lab season. Like the message bit is just part of what she needs the variable. It's not a.
Yeah, if you didn't put.
oh, I see. I'm trying to find
Thanks, guys. He's got it.
yeah, I'm trying to
It's not
So now if I double click my winter, I can add another one. LBL message.text equals. What about winter should we say? Winter. That sounds good. Now I'm getting all of these event procedures. Do you notice how things are getting pretty scattered here? Let's go ahead and run and make sure our winter works. It should. We shouldn't have any trouble there, but we always have to test. Looks great. Now, there's another way we can do this where we could share all of our radio buttons could use the same event procedure. So let's create something like that. I want to copy this one. And paste. Now it's upset with me because I can't have two methods with the same name, but I'm going to change this new one and make it be RAD season underscore check changed. And in our new event procedure here, we're going to replace all those others. We're going to have some if statements. If RAD fall dot checked, then I want to output my fall message. I have fall leaves. What do you think? Might be able to come up with something better. Now, else if RAD spring is checked. Now, why do I not have equal true there? Do I need it?
You just plug a variable in, it's just checking if that happens to be true.
Right, the
Or
dot
you
checked.
Plug a Boolean variable in,
Dot checked is a Boolean. So for spring, we're going to say spring flowers. And for summer, We'll set our message. Whoops. Summer fun. And finally, our last else, we know that we're looking at winter. So now a couple of ways to look at this. We're going to update.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Now, we're doing it like that with the else. Is that gonna make winter automatically check when it loads up?
No.
It won't.
Uh-uh.
Okay.
No, and actually,
Does that make sense why I would ask that though?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. But it's really completely separate from those radio buttons on your form at this point. So we're not setting them, we're just looking at them. We're just checking to see which ones are set. I have another question for you guys though. Is it really okay for me to use an else if here? Yeah, because only one radio button can be checked. So it's okay to use an else if.
So if you're in checkboxes.
Right, if we were checkboxes, we wouldn't be able to, but since we're radio button, we can. Now, some other things about it. This is more complicated than the individual event procedures we had earlier, right? It is definitely more complicated because those were just real simple, single one-line event procedures. So just different ways to do it. Now, I want to make this one, our RAD season, work for winter. Let's try winter first. So I'm going to go to my form designer and click on my winter radio button. Come on, catch up with me. Ah, it's selected. It just has one little dot. Now for my winter radio button, I'm looking at my properties here. In my properties window, I have the properties box checked, the one with the little wrench. I want to look at the events associated with this control. So I'm going to click on the lightning bolt. Oh, look, it says RAD winter. The event procedure is RAD winter check change. I want to change it. So I'm going to use that drop down and I'm going to say, no, use RAD season. Now, is that going to mess it up? Let's run it and see. It shouldn't if we have our logic correct. So we can't tell anything that we changed that. That looks good.
Is it possible that it's just running the first bits of code you ran though, and just completely ignoring the if else statement?
No, I mean, it's working. What are you saying? What? I don't know what you're asking.
You made several separate functions that say if this button, whenever this button gets changed, do this.
Uh-huh.
And then you made a kind of general function that says if any of them changed, then check which one was changed and do accordingly. The if else statement.
No, that's not what we did. Let's look at that code. That's not what we did at all. Now, in that code, we have event procedures that we have associated with the different radio buttons that just do one thing.
Yeah.
We replaced our winter check change with this season's check changed. It's still a method. It just has if statements, and it's looking at those radio buttons to decide which message to display in the label.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Is you've got these event procedures that are above, and they just change one thing each.
Right.
You have this last one here that checks, that does the if else statement.
Uh-huh.
How are we easily able to tell which one it's actually doing?
Which one did we tell it to do? For summer, we're still using this individual one. We can tell because it's bright. Our winter is grayed out. So that's the one that's not being executed.
Okay.
So it's being controlled by this RAD season check changed instead. But we're going to change it to where all of them use that one. Okay, so that way we don't have to worry about it. Because it is confusing if they're using two different ways. We wouldn't want to do that in reality. You just want to know that you can. So in our form, I'm going to just select all of them. All four of those radio buttons. I'm going to go to my checked changed event. Right now it's not showing anything because some of these radio buttons are using different check changed events than the other, so it can't display anything to us. But if we use the drop-down list and pick our RAD season, check changed, now all of our radio buttons are using that universal event procedure with our if statements in it. So let's run it and test it. Does that make sense? Just two different ways we can do it. So everything should be working. Just make sure all your radio buttons put out the right message. So we could delete those individual event procedures out of our code if we wanted to, because we decided that we could do it all in one easier. But again, that's totally an opinion thing. What happens is, if we have other code that we need to add based on radio buttons being checked or not, if we have individual event procedures, we have to add that code, to all 4 of these event procedures. If we have everything in one with these if statements, then theoretically we can just change that one method instead of a whole bunch. Yes, sir.
I've got an error that I'm not entirely sure. It's not letting me do the else radio button for winner.
You should not have any checking on your else. It should just say the word else.
Yeah. That's literally, yeah. Oh, okay.
With the else, it's not checking anything. It's just saying if none of the above is true.
No condition unless you have an if. Okay, so cool. Some interesting stuff for us with our radio buttons. Lots of choices. I want to go back then. Now notice that all of these other RAD functions are all gray. They're not being used anywhere. And that's kind of helpful color coding to know that they're not being called. Okay, let's go back to our form. And let's say now that we want to add some checkboxes, because we need to try to see how those work. So we're going to add some checkboxes and offer up some things that we feel might be necessary to have around for the season. So I'm going to put a new group box here. When I look over at my properties window, I'm not seeing my properties for the group box. I want to change its name and its text property. Why am I not seeing properties? Yep, I'm still looking at events. So I've got to click back to properties. Thank you, sir. That can really catch people when they're at home. All right, so for this group box, I want the text to say something like, you will need, you might need. We'll just make it real general like that. And I'm going to name this one because we might refer to it in our code. So I'm going to name it GRP needs. I'm going to change that for color. Bug there. So let's say one thing that someone might need is an umbrella. So let's go to our checkbox control and put a checkbox inside this group box. Now the checkbox works a lot like the radio button. If you go up to the top of your properties list, first to name it, we're going to name it starting CHK, and we'll make this one CHK umbrella. We have the same check align property where we could flip the box to be on the other side of the text if we wanted to. Can change lots of appearance settings and all sorts of things like that. But I want to change my text property, and I'm going to make it say umbrella. As you look through these properties, notice there's a lot more properties for a checkbox than there is for a radio button. In some cases, checkboxes really have 3 states, They could be checked, partially checked, and fully checked. So there really is a little bit more that we can do with the checkbox. Okay, so we know we need an umbrella, or we might need an umbrella depending on what season it is. Let's use another one. And let's say this one is going to be snow boots. And I'll name this CHK snow boots. Next, if it's summer, we might be able to do some swimming. So let's say we might need a swimsuit.
So you're doing that as a label?
Oh, I don't want to. Let's do that as a checkbox. Thank you, sir. I was just labeling away. So I want this to say swimsuit. And we'll make this name CHK swimsuit. We'll do one more. Let's make this one sunscreen. So we're going to have an uneven amount. And that's kind of how I want it. So we'll have some things that are recommended for winter and spring and summer, but not really any fall things. And we're going to have two things that are summer. So that way we can see how it all reacts. Now, as you can tell, all of my checkboxes are a little jankety here. I'm going to select them all align lefts, and then I'll fix my vertical spacing. Make my group box a little smaller there again. So we're going to approach our checkboxes a little bit differently. Let's look at our code. What I'd like to do is if somebody checks spring over here in our radio buttons, let's check the umbrella. Like we're going to suggest what they will need. So they could uncheck it if they wanted to, but we're really going to check it for them. So let's go look at our code. And in our if-else statement, now this is also an example of why it's good to have everything all in one event procedure here, because we'll be able to change it all in the same place. Also a good example of why you should go ahead and use the opening and closing curly braces when you create if statements, so that you don't have to go back and put them in later. So if somebody chooses fall, I'm just going to display the message fall leaves. We didn't have any items that they need for fall. But if somebody checks spring, I'm going to say I want that checkbox for the umbrella to be checked. And then for our else if somebody chose summer, we had two items for summer. So we have CHK sunscreen and CHK swimsuit. And then finally for winter, we have our snow boots. Okay, let's try it, see if it's working. We should see those check boxes show up. Oh, my spring, since it keeps starting up with spring checked, it already checked the umbrella. So that worked. I'm gonna try winter. Oh, it's still got my umbrella checked. If I choose summer, I'm ending up with everything checked. So it seems like we need maybe some sort of reset button or something. Would that be good?
Maybe you just change them inside whenever they get.
Should we turn all of them off? What if the user clicked some? We wouldn't know. We wouldn't know which ones to shut off, would we? Because they might have decided that they need to take a sunscreen. Yes, sir?
It might be whenever you change it to summer, have it. Okay, now I see what you were saying. No, never mind.
So we're going to have a reset button because the way we wrote this is not conducive to us being able to tell which ones to shut off. But you could very well be in a situation where you would be able to tell, and then that would be what you would want to do. But this one's kind of a little haphazard at best, so we don't have a good way to turn them back off. So let's add a reset button. You always have to do that for most of your assignments anyways. So we'll put that in there. So I'm going to put it kind of down over here. And this is going to be BTN reset. This way, if they pick sunscreen in the winter because they're going skiing, yeah, we want to check it for them. My back color went crazy. Do olive drab instead. Okay, so I want this button to say reset in its text property. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to double click this button to create our event procedure. And this one should be pretty simple. First, we want all of our radio buttons, text property to be set to false. Summer. And finally, winter. And then we want to reset all of our checkboxes. And this is where you can tell until a sentence gets to be super helpful. And if you've named everything with prefixes like the CHK for checkboxes, then it's kind of easy to find your controls. You don't really have to remember what exactly you named them, just that it's a checkbox and they're going to come up in that nice list. Super helpful to me. And I'm going to set their checked properties back to false. Snow boots. Sunscreen. And umbrella. For our label, I'd like to reset our label in our reset method. I think that bug in Visual Basic is going to go ahead and check my first radio button and make it say spring showers anyways, but I still am going to try to reset this label. Say welcome to the season. How did we set that in the first place? I'll make it say the same thing. Welcome to the season display. So let's run it. I've got spring and umbrella. I'm going to choose winter. I'll uncheck the umbrella, but add sunscreen. Okay, now I'm going to do a reset. Oh, and it worked well. I actually do see my label, and my spring is not checked. How about you guys? Did it work? That's weird. Love those bugs. That's how it should be displaying when it comes up.
Could we not have it just set it to that whenever it starts up?
We do. We have that set in the form. The bug is causing the spring event procedure to execute before the form is displayed. Is it someone else's was last time too? In the morning, it was somebody who had the second one too. So
Like, could we do like an on-load type thing, run that reset function? So it's
sure, we could do that. We could set them all. Let's do that. That's a great idea. That's what he's saying. Okay, let's do it. Now, if we want to do that though, I think that's a great idea. I don't want to do it in his event procedure because we're going to call it from two places. So let's create our own method. It's going to be a void method. We're not going to return anything. And we'll just call it reset. We don't need any parameters or anything. And we'll just move all this code. I'm going to cut it all and put it in our new method. And then in the button reset click, let's just run our method. So no difference, just a little bit of rearrangement of code. And then when our form is loading up, we can run this reset method the same way and see if that fixes that problem. Now, even though I didn't do a huge amount of things, oh, C# wants those names to start with uppercase, sorry. I was back to Java and Python there. Need it to be an uppercase letter.
Would the other one be one underscore load?
Oh, we'll show you in just a minute. Let's make sure this is working. I've heard people saying they're lost. I want to make sure they've got this code.
Well, I can't even get the boxes to check. Yes.
Do you want to share your screen?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see what's going on.
If you're in your if and else ifs, all you really need to have is change on the true. I don't think you need to have all the other ones false. I don't know why that would be 30.
It says it's not even being called.
Yep, good call, Austin. Where is your seasons checkbox changed event procedure being called from? Why is it gray?
I didn't put the call in.
So is there an error someplace else that was causing trouble?
I don't think so.
Okay, so let's go to your,
You need to go back and select all the buttons to it there. You select all.
you can't do that there, Alex. You have to do it the way.
You select all the radio buttons and then go to the check change properties, the property the radio button. Nope. Still in the 41. Property
example. Yep. Thank you.
Now, usually I recommend students do exactly what I'm doing so that they don't get lost like that. All right. Now, when we look at this, we're seeing that we've made a lot of progress. You guys had a great idea on this reset. Now, let me show you how to put code in as our form is loading. We are going to be talking about a form load event procedure. The form load event procedure always executes right before the form is displayed. The easiest way to create it is to be looking at your form and just double click in an empty spot of your form anywhere. And that'll create your form underscore load. We want to go ahead and run that reset method right there and see if that clears up that bug.
Can you go to the load section and create the reset function with the load section of the form and then on load it and call it background so that have the function form.load?
You could, if you wanted to. I don't know. I mean, really, we don't like, Visual Studio is not designed for hidden stuff like that. So the form load event procedure is the standard way to do it. Now we could also, you could put it in like your constructor, your form constructor if you wanted to. Yes, sir?
Just from an organizational and easy to read viewpoint, would it be best to have this function kind of more towards the top of the file? Would that
Sure, that would make sense. Yeah. And to me, you would want your form load to be first.
Because
But
it's not working.
Yeah.
is it not making any difference?
It's not.
Yeah, usually when there's radio button bugs like that in Visual Studio, it usually doesn't matter what you do, but you guys had a great idea, so I want to make sure.
Mine's not having that problem. My code isn't too much different from yours.
Well, it might be like the individual computers that we think it's not the code, you don't think, right?
Well, earlier I was able to replicate it, but then I got farther into coding.
No, I was asking her, the bug wouldn't be in the code, it's something.
Right, it's in Visual Studio itself, so it's some sort of maintenance from Microsoft that hasn't been applied.
So it doesn't matter what code.
Nah, and we're just going to have real random results with it, obviously, where some people are going to have trouble and some aren't.
just Microsoft things?
Yeah. They just hadn't fixed it. And if you notice me saying radio buttons are real commonplace for them to have bugs, I don't know why. But a lot of different releases, they've had bugs like that. They must do a lot of things. Okay, so our form looks great. But it's not really everything that you need to get your homework done. So let's add some money here so we can add some things up. What I'm thinking is, let's put in some costs for these things. Make my form a little smaller. It's getting a little unwieldy. So there's so many ways you could do this, but let's look at our checkboxes. And I'm just going to update this checkbox to say that instead of just saying umbrella, it's going to say $10 for an umbrella. And then I think I want my snow boots to be $50. They're what?
They'll probably last you a while, though.
Actually,
They're really cheap. $50 is actually cheap.
as boots go, $50 is kind of middle of the road. It's,
Yeah.
it's not
Cheap, cheap, cheap.
super cheap for snow boots, but it's pretty reasonable.
I've got some pretty good ones that,
This could be why you guys are making me fucking crazy.
When I was growing up,
This could be why I have an attitude issue this semester. It could totally be. Why?
mine's just really
oh no, that was a record. I am really hard on shoes, especially when I was growing up.
Okay, Price is Right. How much for a swimsuit? How much for a swimsuit? What? God, where are you guys shopping? Where do you go?
Go to Goodwill and buy that.
They're $100, people. I don't know where you're going. My swimsuit's high quality. It's $100. Sunscreen, I'll go 5.
But you're getting $5 for sunscreen. We bought some the other day and it was like $12.
Oh my God, where'd you go?
It was at Walmart.
Oh my.
You did get the nicer SPF.
Did you get that banana boat kind or something?
I don't know.
That kind
It
that
was the guy
fries
who-
you?
It was the guy who burns just by thinking about the
Oh,
sunscreen
so it's
part,
SPF 75 or something.
100. You literally got SPF 100.
Yes, sir.
That bug where it would automatically check the spring one, I fixed it.
What'd you do?
Well, whenever you, the radio button on the seasons one,
Yeah.
instead of saying else on the winter one, say else if.
Oh, and put an actual check.
And then at the very top, before all that's called, put that reset function.
I didn't even remember the top of my else. I didn't remind the top of mine.
Well, I'm not going to go do that right now. Thank you, Austin, though. I want to keep focusing on where we are because I don't want to get sidetracked, but we can all try it here after we get done. In the meantime, we'll forge ahead. Now, the reason I want to forge ahead is I want to get you guys some code for the example where you need to do the conversion. Now, I want to output some cost information here to our label. So let's create an OK button. I want it to look just like this reset button, so I'm going to copy. And I'll make my button be BTN OK. And I'll make my text property be OK. Now, I think that my radio buttons and checkboxes are like not at the same place. Okay, let's put some code in this OK button. First of all, we want to display how much that stuff is going to cost. So let's create a variable that's a double, and we'll make it be tote cost. And I'm going to start with that, initialize to 0. And we're going to need to put this into some sort of message. So we'll start out with a couple of variables then. Now let's do some if statements. If our checkbox for snow boots was checked, we're going to add $50 to our total cost. And I want to update the message too. I want the message to say something like snow boots. I better put some double quotes around that. Snow boots space.
Maybe even in line if you were so inclined.
And then I'm going to do another if statement for our sunscreen. And remember, just like we were talking about before, we have to have individual if statements for these checkboxes because many of them.
Because we want to check them individually,
Right.
separate, without regards to what the other ones are, as opposed to checking which one is checked.
Exactly. $5 for sunblock. We're going to add that to our message. Sunblock with a space. And I'm just going to keep adding if statements because I need an if statement for each of our checkboxes. So if our swimsuit was checked, then I'm going to add that $100 to the cost. And I'm going to update my message. Swimsuit space. One more. umbrella. Now, if my umbrella is checked, then I want to add to my cost. What did we say an umbrella was $10? Try to type it like she sings it.
Umbrella.
Is that all of them? 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's how many we had. Okay, so now let's build our output label. Right now, our label is saying something like which season it is. So let's leave that. So I'm going to do plus equal instead of just equal to wipe out what's there. I just want to add to it. So right now it's going to say spring showers, and then we're going to add you might need, and then we'll add our list of things that we built in our message. And then lastly, let's add that cost. I think I'm going to put a period at the beginning to end that previous sentence, and something like your cost will be, and I'm going to use that parameter replacement and say I want to replace this with tote cost.
You may want an opening parentheses.
I just need to get rid of that weird one I've got there for no reason. Now it's upset with me. Look at your error message. It doesn't know what I'm doing here. We did this all the time when we were doing console-based programming. So we have to do something just a little bit different. We have to use the string.format method to format this string the way the console write would format it. And our handy little helper thing doesn't care for it, but that's all right, it works. So we just add string.format and add whatever kind of interesting formatting we want to do, and it'll take care of it for us like we could do in the console. All right, are we done? Let's try it. I think I'm going to choose winter. And oh my goodness, I've got all my checkboxes checked here. So I'm going to click OK. Okay, so winter burr, you might need snow boots, sunblock, swimsuit, umbrella. Your cost will be $165. Ooh, lots we could fix there. Let's fix a few things. I want that $165 to be formatted as currency. That's easy. And then I want a period at the end of that sentence. Now, if I click OK again on a different list, I've got my you might need snow boots, swimsuit, umbrella. Your cost will be $160. Now, it's definitely could use a little bit of enhancement. But I think we're getting our information. Let's click reset. Does everything work resetting? Ooh, it does. I'm going to pick summer. Sunblock, swimsuit. All right, so everybody's working okay? Questions? Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Check it into TFS. Get to it from home. I think we're good. So you guys have lab time. There's no questions. Let's stop our extreme.